Hi there. This is getting up a little slow because I had some problems with the recording yesterday. This is part two of our first lecture where we're reviewing chapter one, which is the scope and challenge of international marketing. This is from the text, as you can see here. Moving through, I usually try to start every chapter with a slide like this that lets you know these are the main items that we're trying to communicate. Sometimes that can get a little lost, but I try to keep it on track. But you can always refer back to here, and then there's that test icon that lets you know that these are things that you should be aware of for the exams. So the first question here is does global awareness even matter? Is it important for people to be aware of things outside their own culture? And I think the position that we'd like to take in the course is yes, it does matter. That global awareness helps us each relate to others. It helps us to be better human beings and citizens of the world. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to give up anything about your own culture. It doesn't mean you have to give up your own national pride, your sense of self. It just means that we'll talk a little bit about what it means. One of the biggest benefits of global awareness and global commerce is peace. Turns out that when countries are economically vested in each other, that they have less reason to fight and a lot more to lose if they do fight. They have a lot more motivation to negotiate and to work through their differences. And this is a worthy goal, a worthy objective. Ironically, this was one of the underlying premises under the construction of the World Trade Centers. The idea was that so much commerce would be happening that everybody, all the nations of the earth, would lose their will to fight. And so this is a good thing. A lot of times we look at capitalism as kind of the root cause of some of the ills in the world, but in its purest form, it causes peace. Now, there's been a number of kind of historical periods of expansion in terms, and what we're talking about here is not colonial expansion, but corporate expansion, where companies have had the resources and the means to seek customers in foreign markets. And the most recent one of these is in the post-Cold War era. So as Russia fell and as the tensions of the Cold War eased, a vacuum opened up for corporations to do business in places they otherwise couldn't. And so we saw a growth of global expansion. This was initially led by the United States. So the U.S.'s leadership position in terms of economic growth fueled this. But as we'll see as we go through the course, this was something where the U.S. maintains a leadership position, but is globalism or companies with global interests is definitely not just a U.S. thing. So one way of looking at this is to take a look at some of the most well-recognized brands in the U.S. So if you grew up in the U.S., you're probably familiar with a lot of these brands, and see who now owns them. And some of these might surprise you about that these are no longer owned or controlled by U.S. interests. So to start with, we got BK. BK is now owned by the Brazilian firm 3G. So I hear all of you now swearing off and saying you're all going to switch back to Mickey D's. But yeah, I mean, did you even notice that Burger King was owned by a foreign company? Heinz Ketchup, right? I mean, this is the famous American family that our current Secretary of State John Kerry married into. It's as an American thing, even though it's a German name, but as an American product as you could imagine. Also owned by 3G. There's a little bit of U.S. representation there with Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. How about Budweiser? I mean, clearly this had German roots, but was an American brand, now owned by the Belgian-Brazilian conglomerate InBev. Miller, the same. American roots. Formed by German Americans, but now owned by a South African company. AMC. So we don't have a lot of AMCs here in the southern part of Utah, but I think there's some more up in the northern part, and definitely a big chain around the country. Not a U.S. company, owned by the Dalian Wanda Group in China. Citgo. If any of you guys are Red Sox fans, you or you know about the famous Citgo sign that sits above the green monster in Fenway Park. Citgo, not an American company anymore, owned by the government of Venezuela, which has its own problems, as you've probably read about, but heavily invested in oil. Here's an interesting one. So in the background, you see Gigante, the Mexican supermarket chain, and in the front, there's the little truck there with Bimbo. Now, Bimbo is a word that in English kind of has a pejorative meaning, right? Because this you kind of get the idea specifically for women who maybe are spacey or not smart. But this is a total nonsense word in Spanish. And something that you may not know is that Bimbo is huge. Bimbo owns U.S. brands like Oro Wheat and Sara Lee that you might be very familiar with. Here's a few others. Good Humor Ice Cream by Unilever, which is British. I think this is kind of funny that French's Mustard is owned by a British company. Excuse me. 7-Eleven, owned by a company in Japan. Holiday Inn is owned by a British company, and Dial by a German company. Here's a fun list of companies that you may have felt certainly were through and through American companies owned by foreign companies. Some maybe surprises here is maybe Gerber Baby Food. That was an American company. Maybe Smith & Wesson. That's pretty American, right? But not anymore. So when we talk about global awareness, right? Here's Jason Bourne, right? This guy's always on yellow alert. He knows everything that's happening. You know, if you've seen the movie, right? He'll sit in the cafe and tell you about how many nose hairs the woman 3 stalls back in the booth has. Insane amount of awareness. So I use this as kind of a metaphor. What does it mean to be globally aware for us? How much awareness is there? How much is there to know? And to start with, to be aware requires that we're objective, so that we don't take so much of our native culture and apply it to the situations of those in other cultures in foreign markets. We have to be able to kind of stand back and say, okay, you know, view these things on their face. The other thing is tolerance. You know, some things do not require tolerance. Human rights violations, crimes, but most of human behavior is not crimes. Most of human behavior is just the way we've done things, and we do them because of traditions. We do them because of beliefs. We do them because our parents did it that way, or we do it because this is the problem-solving tool set that we have because of our culture. And so when we find people who do these things differently, tolerance just means keeping an open mind. Step back and say, hey, you know, there's another way to do it. We'll talk a little bit more about the opposite of tolerance in another slide. There are details. You got to know stuff about what's happening out in the world. So, and this includes aspects of foreign cultures, their history. You know, what events make up their worldview, and then market potential. You know, as marketers, we're not just in the business of introducing products for charity, right? We're not going to say, hey, look, you know, those people in this country could really use Coke. I'm going to go bring Coke over there. No, what happens is that the company behind Coke is going to spend a ton of money on the idea that the people in the new market will derive value from their product, and derive enough value that they will happily pay for the product. And people happily pay for things when it improves their lives. Now, sometimes they're life and death things, and maybe healthcare or life-saving drugs, and sometimes they're just enjoyment. Maybe it's television, maybe it's food and drink. But people pay for things that they value, and so this is marketing is an economic endeavor. It's not just altruism. You also got to stay on top of what's happening in the global economic, social, and political arenas. You know, this 2016 has been a fun year for politics all around the country, and also an interesting year in terms of world attitudes about globalization. You know, for about 20 years, we've had a steady, almost universal embracing of globalization as a good thing, as a positive thing in the world. And this last year, and kind of something that has been simmering for 18 months or so, we had 2 big moves away from globalization and in favor of nationalism. And that's the election of Donald Trump in the United States and the Brexit vote for the UK to exit the European Union in Europe. And these are very interesting trends to watch and see how people are reacting and what they feel like. That they feel like that as we got too global, that their national identities were starting to fade. Did they feel like that that as things got global, that their individual competitiveness or individual benefits were starting to inure to others? Who knows the answer to these questions, but they're worth discussing as we try to understand what's happening in the world at large. And then, of course, current events. We'll talk about current events in the discussion assignments, but certainly national disasters, political events, wars, and even technology. As technology changes, the world changes with it. The demand for new technologies in places where they don't yet have them, the interest in governments to fuel innovation in technology, and technology changes the value of raw materials and resources that exist within a country's borders. So there's a huge economic impact of how technology moves through a country. Here's a little video.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap! Beware, Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
There's a pretty good example of not being very globally aware. So, excuse me. From here, I want to take the conversation into the discussion of what constitutes beauty in different cultures. And to start with, I'm going to show a video from when Dove launched their True Beauty campaign. They put out this video, and then I'll show you some slides about an experiment that a designer did very recently, only about last summer, where she asked designers in various countries to use Photoshop to reflect what the standards of beauty were in the various countries. Let's start with this video.
Okay, folks, so grade 5, please. Cameras rolling. And we're recording sound. It's slated. Sounds great.
So here you can see that even without going to the standards of another country or another culture, we may have kind of an unrealistic view of what beauty means, just even here in the United States. But let me introduce you to this experiment. So this is a picture of the woman who conducted the experiment. So I give her props for being brave. She went out and had this picture taken of herself, and what she did was then she sent her picture out to female designers, so all women who produced the subsequent designs that you'll see, and asked them to touch her up, make her do the retouching to this photo that would make her appear more beautiful to people in their home country. So a few rules there: no nudity. So you could modify her clothing, but the basic form of her body needed to stay there, and everything else was up to them. So first off, like, I think that's pretty gutsy of her to do that. Like, here, send a picture in your undies out to a whole bunch of designers. But look what they came back with. Here's an example from Spain. And you'll see some of the differences. I have these kind of ordered in order from the least amount of change to the most. So a lot of these changes had to do with her face. Here's Colombia. It looks like they needed her hair to be a little longer. Romania, Peru, Argentina. You can see there's a lot of slimming happening, even though she's just a normal-sized woman. Venezuela, look, we want the dark hair, a little more of it. Mexico, the Netherlands. I think it's interesting here that they felt the need to add the boots. Philippines, USA. Looks like we like the long necks. Serbia, South Africa. You can see that the size of her head to the size of her body is being changed. Syria, the UK, totally isolated, cut out from any background. The Ukraine, we went all red. The shoes, the hair, everything. Italy, I actually have no way of even determining if this is the same body in any way, shape, or form. Looks like they just took her head and stuck it on top of somebody else. Egypt and China. So as you look at these, you might find that you feel that one or the other of these is more altered or more straying from the original or the truth. And I want you to identify that your feelings about that are tied into your self-referencing criterion. So the self-referencing criterion, this is the key to the cultural interview assignment that we talked about in the introduction lecture. And these are the things that, for the most part, you're unaware of, but they're beliefs, they are problem-solving approaches that are part of the culture that you grew up in. And so part of the goals of the course are for you to be able to be exposed to things that help you identify your own self-reference criterion, so that you can see areas where you have bias as a result of your own culture, so that you can be more aware of areas where you have bias, and also areas where you may see bias in others. Now, ethnocentrism is kind of like the dark side of tolerance. Ethnocentrism is the psychological term that's used when you believe that your own culture or your own country is right, and that you know how to do things best, that you will do them best, and that members of another citizens of another country or members of another culture will not understand how to do things right as a result or as a byproduct of their culture. Ethnocentrism, no bueno. So as we take a look at the job of introducing a product into a new country, there are controllable and uncontrollable factors that we need to take into consideration. And so let's start with the controllable. The things that we can control typically have to do with the company and the product itself. You can decide what to build. You can decide how your company is organized. You can decide, how you want your product to look, to feel, to behave. You can decide how to distribute it. If you are interested in entrepreneurship, right, one of the early decisions that you need to make as a startup company is what distribution channel is right for you. And this is typically a very difficult thing to change after the fact. So, for instance, if you start out saying, "Hey, I'm going to sell my product in convenience stores," it's can be very difficult to switch to say big box wholesalers or maybe like a network marketing channel. The economics of those channels are so different that it can be really difficult to make the change. And a lot of companies have actually tried to do that and gone broke because they underestimated how hard it was. Marketing makes decisions, right? How the communication channels that you'll use to get your message out and how you will demonstrate your competitive advantage. Those are all within your control. Research, how much money you plan to spend on research and how much time, how much research is enough for you to make the decision to enter a market or not. That's all within your control. Now, the first layer of uncontrollable items are those things that are attached to your home country. So the country where your company is based, you have very little control over the political and legal situation. In other words, if it is illegal to produce your product or illegal to sell it in the way that you want, there's not much you can do about that in your home country. It's possible to lobby. It's possible to raise money to change the law. It's very hard. The competitive structure, right? How you plan or who else is in the market trying to do the same thing as you. You can only control you. You can't control them. And how many and how aggressive they are is totally outside your control. And then the economic climate is the domestic economy something that makes it favorable for your business or more difficult. And that could have everything to do with exchange rates, ability and availability of raw materials, etc. Then the last layer of uncontrollable elements is what's happening in the target market, in the market where you're planning to go. A lot of these are the same, right? Political and legal issues. The regulatory environment in the target country is uncontrollable by you. The basic economy, how many competitors are already there? Who in that market is already trying to do what you're doing? And is it the government? Those are things outside your control. You just have to know what they are and be willing to accept the risk. Cultural forces. So in the foreign market, what if your product it doesn't mesh with the local culture, or worse, is offensive to people in the local culture? You need to know that before you go in, and you can't control it. You just have to be responsive to it. The geography and infrastructure. So the target market may have different climate, and that may or may not work well with your product. The target market may have different transportation issues based on how mountainous or how many waterways there are. Also infrastructure. What if your product relies on a solid internet infrastructure and they don't have one? Well, that's going to be a problem. That kind of goes hand in hand with the level of technology. Are they tech enabled? Does the technology exist in the target market for your product to create the value that it needs to do? And then the structure of distribution. So you can control the distribution channels, but how distribution is structured in the target market is different. So, for example, in Japan, they have a multi-layered distribution process. So the number of steps that a product goes through, and the number of hands it goes through between manufacturer and sitting on the shelf at a retailer, there's a lot, and way more than is typical in the United States. So if you enter the Japanese market, and the other thing is that every rung in that ladder of distribution in Japan has a cultural sensitivity to where they fit in the overall scheme of things, and a bias to keeping things the same. So if you come in with a product where the economics to make your product profitable require you to have less distribution cost, then you're going to have an uphill battle in a place like Japan. then all of these issues are multiplied by the number of products and number of markets that you want to go into. So the basic idea here is, I mean, this is a lot of stuff to consider, and this is exactly the kind of complexity that you're being asked to evaluate as you do your country notebook assignment across the semester. But if this is so hard, why do people actually do that? Why would somebody willingly go through all of this headache to go into a foreign market? And the reason is because there's a ton of money in it. The people do amazingly difficult things for money. Take a look at some of these. Walmart, right? 24%, almost a quarter of Walmart's revenue is coming outside the United States. Look at some of the big ones. Int'l, 85% plus of their revenue is coming outside the United States. So not only did they enter foreign markets, but their entry into foreign markets produced more revenue by far and away than what they were able to sell in their domestic market. Other big ones, Coke, Citigroup. I mean, Citigroup, it's banking. It's a ubiquitous product, and yet they're bringing 75% of their revenue from outside the United States. Here's a map that shows investment by U.S. companies. So the United States is excluded from this in the purple. Investment by U.S. companies in foreign markets. So this is, hey, if I'm a U.S. company, I want to sell in Canada, I'm going to go hire people in Canada. I'm going to go build buildings. You might build retail stores. I might pay for elements of my manufacture or supply chain. How much investment am I going to dump into the economy of that country in order to make my sales in that country work? And you look at the big ones, right? Canada and Mexico, they're our neighbors, right? It's easy to see why they're on the list. The UK and Ireland are big. Germany is big. Japan, Australia. And if you look at the next tier, the orange countries, this lines up with, there's a lot of the BRICS countries here. The BRICS are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and S is sometimes South Africa. But Brazil, India, and China are on here. Russia is in yellow, so the next tier down, and South Africa also in yellow, the next tier down. So you can see that there's a ton of money, billions and billions of dollars are invested by U.S. companies in the infrastructure that it takes to sell into foreign markets. Here's another interesting thing. We'll talk about the country of origin effect as the course goes on, but the country of origin effect means that sometimes there is a positive or a negative impression of a product or a company based on where that company is based. So in this case, here's Citibank, and they've got this whole block here, but they choose to have their address be 1776, a relevant number in American history, as a way of reinforcing that they're an American company. So in this market, they're feeling like that they have a positive country of origin effect. Now, as companies evolve from their origins to global and multinational companies, these are the stages from totally domestic, right? Number one, no foreign direct marketing. They're just selling in the home market. Number two is they're getting pulled into foreign markets. So it's not their main thing. Their bread and butter is still domestic, but they're from time to time they're selling internationally. And then number three is their core business is in the United States or wherever their domestic market is, but they are consistently and regularly doing business in foreign markets. And then the first three of these really are lumped together in terms of domestic interest. Their core business is domestic, but they're kind of dabbling in international stuff. By the time you get to number four, this is really where what we would call a multinational corporation lives. This is a company where they have specific products. They have marketing teams and product teams that are tasked with selling this product in many foreign markets around the world. A bunch of the companies on the list that we showed earlier would fit into this category. And then number five ultimately is global marketing. The big difference between number four and number five is number four is adapting their offering based on the international markets, and they're doing that in a widespread basis. Number five, global marketing is a global marketer would be a company like Coke. So Coke has some minor adaptations to foreign markets, right? The recipe for Coke is sometimes adjusted slightly to, for instance, to match up with cultural sweetness preferences. But the basic flavor of Coke is the same, and the branding of Coke, the shape of the bottle, the logo. There are some places where the Coke logo is translated into other languages. Most places it isn't, and even when it's translated into another language, they maintain the red and white branding. So for Coke, the world is one market, and they feel like that they are meeting the same need for all of the people in that market. Now, this is happening more and more. Companies are getting faster and faster to move from the left to the right of that spectrum. How come? Well, one thing is technology is fostering this a lot. I mean, you could create a business in your garage and sell things on Amazon. You can ship things around the world, and the logistic and technical infrastructure for that exists. Excuse me. Your ability to do foreign exchange is super easy. Usually, your credit card company or your credit card processor can handle all of that for you. So the hurdle to being able to do business internationally is just really low. The other thing is that people start companies in their local markets, and oftentimes they outproduce what their local market can absorb, and so that forces them to sell into broader markets. And then the last one is the people. So maybe you talked about this with a company like Warby Parker. So Warby Parker is now a company that's valued at over $1 billion. They started in about 2008. Four people that went to Wharton Business School, which is University of Pennsylvania's business school. And one of the partners, had spent time at a firm that it was a nonprofit that made eyeglasses available to people in third world countries. As a result of his experience there, he learned a lot about the eyeglass business. And at this time, in 2008, there was nobody really selling glasses online. So his key domain knowledge became one of the big reasons for them to pursue the strategy that they had. Well, what if you have a founder or a key person who has deep domain experience or deep cultural experience in a foreign market? It makes it so much easier to enter a foreign market than if none of you are nobody in the company has any familiarity and everybody's a stranger to the new market. So people can be a big reason that moves internationalization along. This is the COF Globalization Index. So it shows countries. They also measure this shows countries. They also measure companies based on their globalization measures. So here you can see Ireland is listed as the most globalized country. If you look, this is organized where the first 10 are the top 10 in terms of globalization, and the following ones are just big countries. So you can see United States there, even though they're 32, they're in the 12th spot. Ultimately, what we're talking about in this course is all of the things that you have to keep in mind and consider to successfully enter a foreign market. And the thing about that is that cultures are different. Like, our differences are really what make us culturally distinct. And so the upside of that is that makes a rich and vibrant tapestry of humanity. The downside to that is that there are so many pitfalls, so many ways that you can make a cultural mistake in introducing a product that can be tough. So we're going to try to make that give you at least familiarity, if not confidence in being able to do that through the duration of this course. Okay, your teams are organized automatically on Canvas. If you have any problems with your teams, please let me know. But this part is already done for you. Now let's take a look at what's due next week. So as you get a hold of the text, that will give you online access to complete the Learn Smart assignments for chapters 1 and 2. Those are they're not too tough, but they'll be essentially combined reading and quiz questions. So you'll be able to do both of those by the time you, both reading and questions by the time you finish the assignment. There's a video icebreaker assignment. You'll see that on Canvas. That uses the GoReact tool, which we'll use for several assignments in the course. GoReact is the company that I'm the head of marketing for, so I'm familiar with it. I can give you, support on it if you have any troubles. But it's really a way for us to record things and give feedback. It's the same tool I use for the lecture assignments, and the same tool we will use for the oral presentation component of your country notebook assignments. And then finally, as a team, you need to submit to me your country and product selection for your country notebook assignment. Here's the criteria there. Oh, well, first, the video icebreaker. With the video icebreaker, there's instructions when you go in there. It's basically a 1 to 3 minute video, really short. Tell me your name, your major, what year you are in school, a story, something interesting about you, and why you took the course. You'll see all that when you get in there. Really easy, but it will help you get to know each other and me get to know you. Now then, country and product selection. So with your country notebook, we're going to simulate a scenario where you will introduce a product to a market where it does not exist. For this, this is the big team project for the course. So the first step is to select a country and a product. The only requirements here is that the country cannot be the home country of any member on your team, and the product can either be a real product or an imagined product that you make up, either one. Sometimes a real product is easier, but it's your choice. The only requirement there is that the product cannot already be there. So you can't introduce a product to a market where that somebody's already done that for. The scenario there is that your team is a marketing team. You want to introduce this product. You're trying to convince the executives at your company that this is a good idea, that you've thought it through, that you've found all the pitfalls, and that you can successfully launch the product. The interesting thing about that is that the role of the executives will be played by myself and all of the other teams when you do your presentation. So that's it. That's what's up for next week. Please call or email or contact me on Canvas with any questions. These slides will be available on Canvas, so you can review them for notes, and then I'll post another lecture for next week. Thank you.